Hello, welcome to the Drawing 2 demo. So what we're doing this week is working on the portrait, and we're going to be working in charcoal. So I'm going to go over the method that I want all of us to use when sculpting the form. Especially drawing from life using charcoal, you have a limited amount of time to capture the human form. So where you put that time in is evident when you're working from life. So we always have to pick a focal point. Except for when we get to the end, when we do our long poses for figure with invention, we can focus on the entirety of the form. But what I'm going to emphasize is this way of sneaking up to a form using abstract shapes and really using the composite techniques that we use in Doctor Strange perspective and working with darks and abstract dark shapes and abstract light shapes and molding shapes together and sneaking up on those areas until they click. And if you remember from charcoal, using charcoal, we pass around that the powdered material so everyone could cover their paper. But because of the limited time with the figure and the breaks that a model needs inside and during a session, we don't want to waste our time having everyone prime their paper. And I also will say that you can use a soft fine charcoal to get it all down on the paper. But what that'll do though is scratch the paper and even have an imprint of your surface on your surface. So what I did is made a homemade pounce. People call them charcoal sachets, SACHET, and what it is just a black sock that I had, and it's clean. And then I cut the top of it to make it about this height and filled the sock up with the powdered charcoal. So now that I can pounce abstract dark shapes very quickly and also maintain lots of control because I have not messed with the surface of the paper. It is this is a very nice way to get charcoal, get masses down, build an abstract general shape, and then go from there. Because the way to make a successful charcoal drawing and using this method is to have as much control of the surface as possible. And I'll be talking about that as I build my drawing. So yeah, make sure if you want, just get an old sock. We'll make this, and then what I use is an old shoestring to tie the end of it so that the charcoal doesn't fall out. And I barely filled it up, and now I have charcoal material that I can pounce with for my first layers. Next, I have my soft vine charcoal, and I'll break these sticks to make broad shapes depending on how wide I need them, and also make some suggestion of smaller detail of areas of value that I need to make darker. Then we have a large blending stump, and the reason I use a large blending stump is because I like to make broad strokes or broad shapes using something that looks like that shape. So having a broad blending stump creates broad shapes easier than creating shapes using a point or a vine charcoal. This will help move charcoal around, and I'll also show you how to load charcoal onto your stump using a sandpaper eraser carpenter thing. So really what it is just to help sharpen our pencils. And it's a sandpaper, and as I scratch to sharpen my pencil, it leaves a residue behind, and I can roll my blending stump and create shapes using that without having to add too much medium or even ruining the surface of my paper. I have lots of control with this because it's essentially the Pounce charcoal but in a blending stump form. I also have a small blending stump for smaller areas like eyebrows or cast shadows for eyelids. I use a small blending stump as well. It's a size number 1. This blending stump is a size number 8. I have my kneaded eraser, which is it's my reductive tool, but I would also like to make everyone think about this as an additive tool also, that I'm adding highlights, not just taking away shapes. When I take away form, I'm actually adding light. So think about this as your highlights, your sharp highlights, areas that need to be super bright. Then I have my mechanical eraser to get smaller highlights, or have that I need to put more pressure to to make a highlight. Again, your kneaded eraser can be molded into a flat shape to create broad shapes using a flat. I can also create detail, point. So the kneaded eraser is a versatile tool. If you do not have this or you lost it, make sure you have it for your labs. You need this to make successful charcoal drawings. You need soft vine charcoal to create successful drawings, and you need your charcoal pencils too. I have a range of charcoal pencils going from soft, medium, and hard. Hard charcoal pencils are nice because I can sneak up slower to a finished dark shape. And I don't use this as line. I use this to emphasize dark areas. Using your charcoal pencils are the very end when you have solidified everything and you just need to accent some of the darkest areas. I don't fill in my vine charcoal. My vine charcoal layer is going to be pretty accurate with middle grays. This is really just to emphasize some of the darkest areas. So I have those too. And those are the tools I'll be using. So hopefully that is really helpful. That's beginning drawing foundation knowledge, but I want to share that with you so you can make this and remind everyone so that you have the tools to make the drawings that I make also. I'll be working from a reference photograph. The reference photograph, because I can't get a live model in my studio. I asked a few friends and everyone was too busy this weekend, and I just am working from a reference photo that I'll have available to you in Canvas. And it's going to be, and I picked this reference photo because it's pretty similar to how the figure and the model will be lit in the lab using a spotlight and everyone being in a dark room, huddled around and drawing the figure. So what I'm going to do first is get my pouncer, my charcoal sachet, and I'm going to block in general dark shapes. You can see just a light pat and so much medium comes out. It's nice. And I like the sachet, the sock, because it can give you a nice push for the medium to create these dark shades a little more accurately. And so what I want us to look now is this shape. We can draw that shape. I have no doubts that any of us could get this sachet and mimic this shape. That's what I want you to realize, that these abstract shapes, we can all make these shapes. Now, how we mold these and get these to work as areas. We can't be too fixated on the details. One way to do that is by squinting at the figure. I don't really squint so much as I just I am able to just kind of be like, okay, that shape is a little rhombus type shape, parallelogram, and then the hair goes there and goes here. So, and also the cheeks have some dark lines too. So that's how I see these things. Now you don't want to slam your pouncer like super crazy hard because charcoal's going to go everywhere, but you want to just get enough medium in there to start sculpting your form. And you can see that the eye sockets, use your pouncer to get those eye sockets. Those eye sockets are inside the figure. And if you squint, you'll start to notice that eyeballs aren't as bright as you think they are. The highlights of the forehead and her cheek are way brighter than the value inside her eyeball. So it's actually helpful to just pounce that general eye shape in there. If you got used to using your finger to take away medium from Doctor Strange's perspective, I, that I thought it was nice to be able to use your finger on stuff like architectural things, and because there's a lot of texture on there, so your oils from your hands can't really mess up something like that, like lots of buildings or windows, because there's a lot of modulating values, so your oils can't mess things up. But on figure, I never use my finger to take off medium. I use my blending stumps to take up medium. So try to fight that urge, because that oil will make it impossible to start stacking some, taking away highlights. I like to use the end of the sock, the sachet, to take away some edges, make sure that I get, and I can, it's kind of like erasing, but I'm also creating these nice brush strokes, and it's fun because I'm still working with some general abstract shapes, but also getting things a little more accurate, molding the face into submission. I forgot to tell you what paper I'm using. Right now I'm using the Strathmore drawing pad paper. It's white. I really like using white paper because, especially for this, I can really see how dark everything needs to be. When I see the highlight of this, I actually can start dragging some medium into the forehead because I don't need it to be super white. And so it helps me to really save those whites for the very end and use the white of the paper to create strong highlights. You can use newsprint, but what I like about newsprint is that it's cheaper, so you can go through. It's soft, but also what I don't like is that you can't get those strong highlights. So your drawings kind of stay in a middle gray area. But and also for size, right now I'm at 12 by 16 inches, but I'm kind of like just making this demo clear in terms of size and the way it looks. But theoretically, I could just keep my big drawing pad if I had a bigger masonite board and kind of just draw the head, and then I could just crop in with photographing it for my e-portfolio or cutting it down afterwards and finding a good composition. Oftentimes I feel like people kind of get stuck when they're thinking about drawing. For us, what we're doing is learning about the form, learning about the figure, and learning about portrait. So just thinking about the portrait and light and shadows is enough. And then you can crop in your paper. So there's not really a size limit. I would, if I were a student taking the course, I would keep my 18 by 24 drawing, 18 by 24 inch sketch pad open, and then start drawing on it, and then crop down later by photographing it or cropping it down physically and having that in my e-portfolio to kind of show my studies and my progress. What's really nice too is if you did this on a big paper, you could later in the week focus on eyes and draw lots of little eyes over here that are the same and trying to make it better and more realistic, or whatever the problems that you're having, like a nose, a cast shadow on a nose, and draw it over here or over there. So you have lots of room to do lots of these notes, and that's also another reason why drawing on the 18 by 24 would be a lot of forgiveness and room. You can divide it up in fourths if you want, or in halves, and just work like that. Okay. Now, I'm going to use the end of my sock. I keep calling it a sock because it's a DIY thing, but the sachet. And I'm going to get the end of it with the where it's tied. And I'm going to just, again, continue taking away and pushing medium to where I need it to be. Okay, so to me that's a good place. Now what I'm going to look for is my sort of my cornerstone, my anchor for this project. Where am I going to spend some time? And my time that I like to spend on when doing these broad portraits like this are this triangle here, the two eyes, and the nose, and kind of jumping in and around here. Also coming into the hair and creating some contrast. And I'll spend a lot of my time here. Because if the eyes don't really work, and everything else works, it'll be kind of funky. So what I like to do is just focus on here and do that. So and right now I'm just looking at the shapes. I'm gonna crush that value down. Okay, let's see. Everything's looking all right. Okay. Now I'm still looking at a general dark shape here. Looking at the darks. I'm not preoccupied with drawing a eyeball. I'm preoccupied with getting these dark shapes to look like the dark shapes in the reference. So again, going back to my sandpaper sharpener and just roll my blending stump in there. So I'm not ready to set my anchor down. I want to make sure that I have some more solidification here, so I can get these forms to look accurate. And if you're following along with the reference photo, you can see I have created the highlight just by carving those darks around the highlight. Just looking for those dark shapes. All right. So at this point, I'm maintaining a lot of control because I am just loading more vine charcoal on my stump, so I'm not hurting the paper. I'm keeping the paper smooth and no scratches in it. It's all erasable. I can erase to white with my kneaded eraser on here. I'm also emphasizing all the darks over here because over here it's not as dark. So I don't really need to emphasize those shapes yet on this side, other than the corner of her eyebrow, which starts about there somewhere. And I still have the shadows from the eye socket right here. So, now with that in mind, I'm going to then get my vine charcoal. Also, another good idea is to get a scrap paper. To the side over here, so you can test your material before you lay it down to make sure that it's not going to scratch your paper. So by sanding it down, making sure that it's going to create the smooth texture that you want. And I don't like when my charcoal starts to look the same. That vine charcoal can start to look pretty monotonous and similar. So what I like to do is get my my large blending stump, and move those around so that it doesn't look the same. I can create these nice textures and modulate the value at the same time. All right. I'm getting, it's starting to come into realization for me pretty quickly. So by just looking at these shapes and the darks and the lights, I have drawn a semblance of a face. And so from there, let me pull down that shadow real quick. All right. From there, I'm going to just take a step back and just look at the broad shapes. Really, really look at what's happening there. Not romanticize my drawing, not being careful with it, just looking at it and being okay with how it looks, but at the same time maintaining the integrity that I can just erase it or make some dramatic changes. Go ahead, get this nice dark under the jawline. Just emphasize that a little bit. Get the blending stump, soften it up a little. Don't want it to be too hard because it goes into her neck. Okay. I also just spit. So be careful when you're blowing charcoal off your paper. So let's see. It's looking It's looking all right. I'm gonna emphasize this eyebrow shape. Get my small blending stump and pull that medium down from the darkest area and then moving it to the lightest area so that it modulates naturally on its own. And be careful about getting too dark too soon in some areas too. You know, where it's a natural inclination to just go in because you spend all this time blocking it in and trying to get it right, but try not to get in there too soon. I'm gonna again roll my blending stump into the powdered charcoal that I've had from sharpening. Again, I'm not measuring, like, is that right? Are those eyes one eye apart? Because if I do that all the time, I think it's okay to do that while you're learning, but if I did that all the time, you know, 1, 2, 3, 3 eyes, there's the bottom nose, 1 eye, 2 eyes over, there's her eye, pupils over the lips. If you start to look at this person, this model, you can see that she actually has wide set eyes, wider set, and her pupils don't hit the corners of her lips, which there are all these measurements that if you always went by them, then you would create a generic person. But by looking at just abstract dark shapes, I am making a person without measuring. That's the beauty of this process. It's real art because I'm looking at it and it's coming into it's sneaking up into the areas and it's resolving. But then I have all these nice loose strokes that I'm gonna probably keep because what I'm looking at right now, I'm like, this is beautiful right here. I love that. And when I look at this, I'm like, wow, I like how it dissolves. I might do some more stuff, but I like what's happening on these edges around here and everywhere. But then I really am starting to enjoy that. Oh yeah, her eyes are coming in, shadows are looking right. I'm not thinking, am I drawing the eye right? There's no stress in this because all of this is controllable. My paper has not been ruined except for when I accidentally spit blowing my charcoal off my paper. Okay, and now I'm gonna get my kneaded eraser, and actually I'm going to push some more medium around, but I've used up my medium that is left on here, so I'm just gonna go in here, sharpen my pencil just to get a good point ahead of time, and I am making some more dust so I can load my stump. I'm going to solidify some of this dark area and then introduce some more medium into her forehead because it seems a little bit too bright in most areas. So I'm toning down some of those highlights that are already there from not adding enough medium, and I'm bringing in some more charcoal. Good. Love all that. All right. Okay. Let's see. Cool. Now, I'm gonna get my kneaded eraser, And I'm going to make a broad shape that matches the width of the highlight in proportion to my picture, my reality. This is my reality. This is going to help me make sure that I have everything in line. So I want to use this as my navigation tool. And I'm like, okay, that highlight is as wide as the eye that I have here. So in general, this socket, I'm going to then make my kneaded eraser about that width and just kind of take away that highlight. You can just see how bright these these highlights can be. That's how you want your paper to look like when you're starting to add medium. You don't want to protect everything. Don't protect everything at the beginning. That'll just cause you to fail. Put all that vine charcoal in. Look at this. I can get so bright. So make sure you just pounce that charcoal in. Bring that sock to class. Again, you can use a vine charcoal, but like I said, when you do that, you will you will possibly scratch into your paper, causing that vine charcoal to stick in there, giving you less control of your medium. I'm gonna take some of the charcoal off my small blending stump, so I can take away some of the highlights just by moving medium around, and it will not make it as harsh as the kneaded eraser can be. I'm just barely gonna lift up some eyeball shading approximately to where I think it is. I'm just sneaking up to it. I did not use any measurement, and I'm not using anything other than in that area, where is that light going to be? Just feel where it's going to be, because that's not permanent. I just erased. I can add more medium with my blending stump. I can push that into the area that it needs to be. I can sneak up to it. Gonna recharge my blending stump. Just rolling it on there. I'm not grinding it because it'll ruin my blending stump. Just rolling it in. Again, I'm not creating any lines. The eyebrows, he just said no line. I'm emphasizing that shape. I'm not thinking about line. I'm emphasizing that shape. That shape is pretty thin, so yeah, it resembles a line, but it's not a line. It's a shape to me. All these are shapes: lights, darks. What do they look like? About where are they? Let me sneak up to it. I'm going to soften the edges of that highlight, just the edges, with the blending stump. Going to come in, emphasize some of the darks. All right, I think I'm ready for my triangle of peace. My Bermuda Triangle. I'm going to be lost there. I'm going to be there for a while. And I'm going to start with my vine charcoal just to darken some of the areas that are already dark from my suggestion of where they are. Rolling my blending stump into my sandpaper. Just get that dark nostril in there. You can see I'm not doing any of this. I am literally looking at dark shapes, measuring by dark and light rectangles, dark and light triangles, dark and light curved triangles, or triangles with a curve on one end. That's how I'm thinking about all these shapes. Let's see. I'm gonna get my hard vine charcoal and start emphasizing some of these darker areas. Um, so when you get to areas that you want to get darker with the vine charcoal, but they seem to, your vine charcoal seems too broad, don't just settle. Just get your vine charcoal stick and get about that size. And that'll be your new brush stroke for that area. I'm gonna get my blending stump. Smooth out that texture. That's what I love about using the blending stump with some medium on it, because when I do that, I can make that shape of shadow against that eyelid and not have to not to force that shape. Instead, I made that shape by using the tool that resembles that shape. Just getting more medium for my blending tool. Just dropping everything. All right. Gonna come back with the hard charcoal pencil, sorry, and emphasize this eyebrow. Just switching gears here. Really looking at those areas that I'm emphasizing, both from creating them, from abstract shapes, and then really looking at where I need to emphasize dark shapes. And go ahead and get my knead eraser and make a really fine point with it and pick up those highlights of her eyes. You can see how much control I have because I didn't cake on soft charcoal pencils. I can really get that to lift up. And if your edges ever get too dark, or like, well, I put way too much contrast on there, just get your blending stump, make sure it's clean on your test sheet, and just soften that edge up. Soften the edge up and you'll get back to a softer edge that you wanted in the first place. I'm gonna get my mechanical eraser now. Make sure that's clean. Really pick that highlight up. And then bring some of that eyeball in. Again, not once am I thinking what am I drawing the eyebrow bone accurately? Am I drawing the anatomy of this accurately? I am purely thinking about lights and darks. All right. My anchor, my my cornerstone to me is looking pretty accurate. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little more dark to the hair. I really like what's happening here, so I'm gonna keep that open. I'm also not just thinking about, "Okay, let me get this person down. I'm also thinking about my surface as a reality and as a piece of art. So when I see like these awesome little modulated values for my blending stuff, I want to keep that in there. I want to keep that movement. I think it looks beautiful, and to me creates a striking image comparatively to something that's more realistic, like the eyes, ears, and nose. There's so much fine charcoal in there that actually using the fine charcoal for that area would benefit me better. And you can get carried away very easily with these highlights, so you want to make sure you soften those edges, because right now they look as strong as the highlights in my nose and forehead, and that's not what they're supposed to be. Oops. That was my soft pencil. And I said oops because I wasn't sneaking up to the value. It went really dark very fast, so make sure you're picking up the right pencils, because it could really get you the incorrect value. I'm going to go ahead and go to my medium pencil now. So for when I'm making areas darker with the pencil, I'm not coloring. I am parallel hatching with the form. And remember, I'm not parallel hatching with the same intensity as some of these areas here. I am accenting places that are actually darker than areas that are not as dark. Just getting the accurate shape of that triangle, which now created a more accurate bone structure. And I didn't do that with an anatomy book. I did that by looking at it at the shape of the light. Little haze there, I'm gonna pick it up. Probably skin oil. Now, when we get to lips, what really makes lip, let's see, what makes the lips so accurate are what's happening around it. You don't draw in the lips. You draw the lips in by carving things around it. Obviously, we'll cast more shadow where the lips start carving more light, but paying attention to what's happening around the area of the lip will create a more believable shape. And actually, this is a nice place to kind of mention that this could be a nice day one study. Having just these three things and having everything else be like that. The end of day one. I think that'd be a nice, a very accepted part of your e-portfolio. Well-rounded, shows the steps that I've done, also shows your attention to looking at light and shape and form and the values and just working throughout the classroom. So I could stop here as a student for drawing 2 and be like, okay, that's it for now. That's, you know, if it took me all class time, I would be happy to say, okay, that works for me. It looks beautiful as an artwork, and it kind of gives me an idea of what you did. It'll give us an idea of what you did for class and give us a picture to your process. So what I'm doing there is mimicking these shapes that I can't really see, but also contouring the overall valley structure of what I did here, and kind of giving this nice, oh, that's where her hair stops. All right, back to the lips. Now, All right, medium pencil. Let's see. I'm sorry I stopped talking. I'm basically just implementing all the things that I've already said. And so during a demo, I usually have people asking exactly what's happening or what'd you do there. So hopefully I have, in lecture, I'll have already said, and make sure you ask questions as you go, because I stop talking after a while. So now I'm having fun here. So you can see that this is still the first layer right there. I've completely erased it to white, but I'm gonna see what it looks like if I play with some of these edges, have a little artistic fun. I'm going to get the rest of this powder onto my large blending stump, make some strokes to kind of finish this piece out. Just contouring a dark shadow from her scarf, and then kind of playing around. I really like the movement in her hair, so I'm gonna kind of block that in a little darker. Kind of have high fashion-y hairstyle. Play with my blending stuff to mix with those textures. Do some flyaways. A million flyaways right now. Just kidding. Arborescence. And get my sachet and kind of do some interesting textures down here. So I think at this point, I have done some stuff and now I'm kind of playing with it, having a little bit of fun. Oops, oils. I'm nearing the end, so I'm not too concerned with my oils messing that up. But I'm at a place where I'm very happy with where it's at and kind of just playing with textures and making some art. Right now I made a portrait, but now I'm going to try to make art with it, play around with the edges. if it's wrong. All right. So I've come to a stopping point for now. Um, just kind of playing around with it, really not changing much. And yeah, thank you for sticking through it. If you watched the whole thing, it's really nice that you did that. But pretty much up until the cornerstone was pretty much how I did everything else. Just really looking at those darks, really looking at the lights, and figuring that out from there. Hope you got something from this, and you have a fun time playing with all of this. So, all right.